Hello, friends. Welcome back to Honoring the Journey. And today we have a really exciting guest. I say exciting because as I was reading about what this guy does, I realized, wow, this is deeply, deeply needed in the world. His name is Jay Aedo, and he is a writer of children's books, but he's also a teacher of practical philosophy, which I love. I'm so fascinated by that. I used to be so afraid of it, Jay. Back in my very religious days, but now I love it. And he teaches kids, guys, get this. He teaches kids about personal responsibility. How to take responsibility for your actions instead of always blaming somebody else or oh, God did it through me. Oh, Satan made me do it. It's like how can I as a human being be a better human? And so I love that you're doing that, Jay. Jay Aedo, welcome to Honoring the Journey.
Thanks for having me, Leslie. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to find out more about you. Before we dive into the fun things of your book and everything, I kind of want to know a little bit about you. I'm
Sure.
assuming since you are an author that you also are a reader. Do you like to read?
I love to read. I read a
Okay.
lot. Maybe like two to three books a month. I try to read,
Oh,
mostly
wow.
self-help books and things like that.
So, okay, if there was one book, I know it's hard and you're probably going to have to dig deep for this, Jay. One book
Yeah.
that made the most impact on you, what was it?
You know what? Top of mind comes a book called Outwitting the Devil. I'm not sure if
Oh,
you've heard of that book.
no, tell me about it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's really shifted the way that I think about um, Satan and the devil and good and evil. And
Really?
it's by the same author of Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, the same author. But this book was suppressed for many years and didn't come out until maybe 10 years ago, well after he died. And
Really?
so, yeah, in the book, essentially a conversation between himself and the devil, and it's just mind blowing the way that he talks to the devil and the devil responds. The devil's almost obligated to answer, and he's hesitant to answer his questions. He's like, "No, please don't ask that." It's very intriguing.
Oh, I love that. So what did you like the most about it? What was the thing that you were like, "Okay, this is gonna be one of the tops?"
One of the things that most resonated with me is toward the end of the book, he breaks down uh, how to unveil society and how to educate kids. It's almost like it's the thing he doesn't want to say mostly, because the way he controls the world is by keeping us ignorant
Mhm.
and afraid of him. And he unveils this secret, which really isn't a secret. It's almost obvious when he once he starts unveiling what he's saying. He's telling you how to educate kids, and it's very evident once he starts laying it out. It's like, of course, like,
This makes sense. Oh, I
yeah,
am gonna go out and get this book, and I'll put a link, guys, in the show notes because you
sure,
probably do too. You can go click it
awesome.
right now and order it while you're listening, but, well, interesting. Okay, so all right, educating kids, and now why are you so passionate about this? Because this is what drives you right now.
Absolutely. And until recently, I didn't even have kids of my own until very recently. It's literally, I have a 1 week old baby.
Oh my gosh, Jay!
And
Congratulations, boy or girl?
girl, her name's
Oh,
Maya. We're
Amanda?
Maya.
Oh, Maya. Oh, so cute.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so it's something that I've thought about for many years, is because we're so impressionable.
Mm.
And like the thing that you program us with, it's like we pick up and run off with it as if it's the truth. And we don't realize until so much after, when we start questioning our beliefs, whether it's even true or not, or what does true even mean to us. And so it's been very important to me, for the past 7, 8 years, to understand the angle that we're coming at when we're talking to our kids. Oftentimes I've seen, in my family or with friends, it's like we don't want to talk about certain subjects, so we avoid saying certain things, or we, distract with iPads, or, and I just wanted to make sure that I understand not only what I'm teaching, but why I'm teaching it to my kids. And it just seems because it's so heavy. the weight that what we teach at such a young age, essentially the unconscious mind from 0 through 7, from my understanding, is just like this sponge where you're programming this blank slate, and you're programming it to become what it's meant to become. And
Mm.
so, it means so much to me, because the fact of the matter is that, these kids grow up to be adults, and they grow up to be, these people who are making decisions in the world. And so oftentimes they don't even know why they're making these decisions. This is where like trauma comes into place. Is like you're affected by something you were taught, and you don't even remember when you were taught it or why you believe it.
It's just like always been there, it's always been your
Right.
truth. Yeah,
Right.
that's really interesting. And it's something that I think a lot of people who are dealing with trauma now wish that they kind of knew more about when they were younger, is that, there's different ways. So give me an example of something that a child may grow up believing that you're trying to say, hey, what if we teach it and then maybe this way? What would it look like then?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I talk about the most is these Bible stories, because no matter what religion we're from, what age bracket, what part of the world is, somehow we all know these same stories. The stories of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Adam or God and Lucifer. These stories are impregnated into our system somehow,
Mm.
at least for the majority of humanity. We know these stories. And so, I've questioned why the story of a man who kills his brother is repeated throughout history. It's
Mm.
almost like the Bible is sharing stories of how not to act.
Mm.
And we all have different ways of learning. Like, I don't want to know how not to act. I want to know how to act. It's a more efficient way of teaching if you show me how to act rather than how not to act. And so that's why, I'm not sure if I sent you the book or not, but I'm sorry about that. I meant
That's
to.
okay. No
Uh,
worries.
in the Bible, Cain is jealous of his brother Abel,
Yep.
and he kills him, and
Mhm.
that's the story. And then the noble brother Abel, he allows himself to be killed. So
Mm.
both of these characters are terrible people. We don't want to be either one of these characters. We don't want to be the one who dies, and we don't want to be the one who kills. And so it's like these are our role models, and this story is repeated throughout history over and over and over. So the program goes in deep, and then we're led to believe that we're the descendants of these characters. And
Mm.
in the Bible, it nonchalantly says that Cain is unable to live with himself, with what he had done. So he runs away, and then he goes on to build cities. And that's where we come from. So as opposed to that, I changed the story to, spoiler alert, where Abel is noble, and he's strong, and he knows who he is, and he knows what he's made of, and he's competent, and he stands up and he fights, and he puts Cain in his place. Rather than retaliate with anger and vengeance, he just subdues him. And then they're able to have a conversation as to why that Cain was trying to kill him. And Cain admitted to him that God favored your gift over mine, and I
Mm.
was jealous, and I didn't want you to have that. And well, what made you think that God favored your gift over mine? I thought your gift was wonderful, because he's a farmer, so he picked out his fruits and vegetables. So it was just a misunderstanding within Cain, where he didn't realize what he was or who God was. And
Right.
so he didn't know why he would give his best to someone he didn't know, essentially. And
Mm.
so he was saving the best of what he had for himself and his family.
Mm.
And Abel showed him, well, that's what God is. It's yourself and your family. You were already doing it. You were already giving your best to
Wow.
God. And so it was just a misunderstanding. And then they go on to build cities, and then we become the descendants. It's just, to me, it's like, it's so simple. I understand that for some people it can be offensive for me to try to change history, but I'm really not changing history.
No, I don't think you are.
I'm bringing attention more. I'm bringing more attention to the story that has shaped us, in
Right.
order for us to just make a choice. Because at the end of the day, we're so far along in the story that whether that story is true or false is irrelevant to our day-to-day life. And
It's just,
so
what is it teaching us?
what is it teaching us, and what are
Right.
we deciding today? Because today
Right.
is the day to choose what life you're going to lead out.
Well, and I think that that's important to give kids perspectives that aren't just, so narrow. And I think we are just many of us, especially if you come from a very religious background where, scripture is it. Like it's a history book, it's the only truth. It's, you know what I mean? If you want to know if God said it, it's in that book. And there's no other way of looking at it, And I think that there's this like white knuckled hold on it and fear of somebody misrepresenting it. And I don't feel like that's what you're doing. I feel like what you're doing is saying, okay, so that's the story that we've been taught. What if we looked at it this way? What if it happened this way? How would history have been different? How would what would you have learned in this situation? I don't feel like you're like saying this doesn't exist. I think you're saying, oh, it definitely exists. And this is an option. But here's another one. And I like that. I think it's gutsy. But I think it probably will tick some people off. But I think it's people who are living in fear, I believe. Just fear of, I don't know, all of it, any time that there's anything that comes up against what you've been taught is it, you know. One of the things I remember in religion was hearing, this is the truth, not a truth. And so anything that came up against it was a threat to that. And if that, I mean, that felt really uncomfortable to me when something came up against what I believed was the absolute truth. But I think this is really just a perspective. It's not trying to say this is truth. It's trying to say, what if? And bravo, bravo.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you. So tell me about Jay. Like, how did you grow up? Why do you think this is, what drives you?
Yeah, it actually has absolutely everything to do with why it drives me. So I grew up in a religious household, and I wasn't allowed to question things. And I got slapped in the face if I questioned it. So I secretly questioned things. And it also made me, I think the main reason I was able to break out of the program was because it didn't resonate with me. The message never resonated with me. I didn't pay attention. I just went through it because I had to. And then once I got to an age where I was able to question it because I was essentially free, I wanted to question it because I wanted to understand who God was.
Mm.
And the truth was that at the time, I was angry with God. I had a lot of resentment toward God and a lot of resentment and anger toward my parents too. So I wanted to reconcile that. I didn't want to live with anger because ultimately the truth is I had a pretty happy childhood, except for not being able to question what I wanted to question.
Is that where the anger was coming from? Just feeling like you couldn't ask?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh.
Because I was treated very well. I had loving parents whom I love and respect still today, and whom, because of the man I've become, we've been able to even come closer because of
Mhm.
it. Because now I can ask questions, right? And now I know how to ask questions in a way where, the last thing I want to do is offend my elderly parents. But
Mhm.
now I'm able to think of ways to ask questions without offending. And so it's brought us a lot closer.
That's amazing. Sometimes it's very difficult to hear anything that would go up against your core beliefs because that's what gives you a firm footing in a world that feels very out of control and scary if you don't have a truth. And so for you to question that took a lot of guts. It sounds like you probably were a very inquisitive, precocious child who was told, don't do that, but you didn't listen.
Absolutely, absolutely. For a
Yeah,
long
I can
time, I
relate.
just secretly did it. I just secretly, for a long time, I lived kind of like a double life. Like I wasn't allowed to act a certain way while I was at home or at church, and so, I acted that way at school. And so
Mm.
I had to come to a conclusion where I was like, well, who am I, this character or am I this character? And so
You had to jump.
unhappy.
Yeah.
I was unhappy with whom I had become. And so I had to sort of uh, I had to make amends with that.
Well, yeah, and you had to kind of step into your authenticity and like be like, well, this is who I am. And I do think that is such a big part of deconstruction, is stepping into your authentic, who you really are. And sometimes that doesn't line up with who people expect you to be. And that there's some stuff that comes with that. Have you had any poor reactions? It sounds like you and your parents got closer, but has anybody else taken this maybe not the right way?
My parents were actually the people I was most afraid
Mm.
to come out to, essentially, come out of the closet.
Yeah.
Like, I have different beliefs.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but and then so that opened things up to, once I conquered essentially my biggest fear, which was disappointing my parents, which, by the way, didn't really happen. The thing I was most afraid of, my parents were just, they were shocked, sure, but very responsive. And the way that I handled it, I'm genuinely proud of the way I handled it, because it took some finessing. I thought about it for a long time, and I encouraged them. I took like this different role where I was no longer, a child. I was the one leading the way. And so I was able to, thank them and be grateful for their ability to get me this far. And so I kind of shifted things on them. I feel like I tricked them in a way, because, I was just like, and it's been a long time coming, because, I was well into my 30s when I had the conversation with them as
Yeah.
to, and before then I was almost avoiding them. So I was like, I don't want to avoid my
You don't
parents.
like that either. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
It's like, just
so
love
I,
me
I
for who I am, not for what I believe. Yeah.
right. So the fear was that they would shun me away, or that they would uh, remove me from their life. And that didn't happen. And I made sure it didn't happen, because the way that I maneuvered the situation, it was, they would have to be completely cold hearted people to completely shun me away at that point. But
Yeah.
I'm proud of the way that I handled that. And then after that, it wasn't that I didn't care what other people thought, but almost like it wasn't as important. And the
Mm.
truth is, Leslie, that, nobody has really told me to my face that this isn't good. Anybody that has given me the opportunity to express my thoughts, where I'm coming from and where I'm going with these ideas, it resonates.
Mm.
And other than, I've done a couple of other interviews. I've actually done several interviews like this. There's only been two people. We actually had a great conversation and things went really well. And for whatever reason, they just didn't post the podcast.
Oh.
So maybe they thought it wouldn't resonate. But other than that, nobody has told me to my face that this is disrespectful to God or our belief system or the Bible.
Well, I think honestly, it's so much less about like a legalistic look at, oh, you're changing the story. No, no. I mean, I think what you need to do is look at, what is your motive in doing this? Your motive is love and connection and teaching personal responsibility, something that the church really isn't very good at doing. And and I think that when you look at that motive, see, for me, I think if you make a decision because you're leaning into love, you can't go wrong, because God is love. And what did Jesus say? Like, the first and greatest and most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I think what you're teaching is, part of that process is loving yourself. You have to learn to love who you are and be able to express that. And I think that your books are doing that in these children. So are you getting any feedback?
It's all love, Leslie. I get a lot of great
Yeah.
feedback. I get a lot of great emails and a
That
lot of
makes me
great.
so happy. That makes
Yeah.
me so happy. I wish I could say the same, but it's okay. I think a lot of why I'm not getting a whole lot of love, I do get a lot of love. Don't get me wrong. But I think some of the people from my past are just very afraid, that I'm going down a dark road. And really, I'm just trying to figure it all out. And I think that everybody should do that. no matter what religion. Which leads me to a question: what religion were you when you were growing up?
Jehovah's Witness.
Oh wow, wow, that's a pretty strict one too.
Yeah, very strict, pretty intense.
Wow, wow. So where do you stand now? What would you say your faith looks like now?
I definitely don't identify with any specific religion.
Mhm.
I'm definitely, I've come a long way, and I understand who God is and what God represents in my life and what role God plays in my day-to-day life, and it's mostly valuable to whom I've become. Um, and the truth is, what God has showed me is also, the contrast. That's what these books represent, is a contrast, is like looking at yourself in the mirror. It's oftentimes the opposite. It looks the same, but it's the opposite. And so God's reflection is the devil. The light needs the dark in order to have any value, or else you can't see it. It just becomes obsolete. And so, God really shines the way in my life, and I allow God to play that role for me because it's important to me. I've uh, come I've come a long way to understand that for myself, at least, and that's why that book, "Outwitting the Devil," really means a lot to me, because it's almost like at the time when I read that book, it's been probably 7 or 8 years. Um, it was almost like God was showing me, like, hey, the devil isn't exactly what you think it is. It's not quite as evil as you think it is. It's actually my best friend. That's the last book I'm releasing, is the relationship between God and Lucifer. And they're not enemies in my imagination. They're actually best of friends, because they bring the best out of each other, and they play a role for each other. And that's what they're doing. They're playing a role like innocent kids, nothing personal. They're just playing a role like in a movie or a skit. And so, you know, that relationship with God has been able to illuminate what the devil means, what demons are. To me, the demons are the things that bother us about ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. And so it's just like haunting us, right? Because we don't want to look at it. It's like we're
Right.
turning a
The
blind eye
shadows.
to the things that bother us most about ourselves. And these are the things that we should be shedding lights on, because it's us, and we're hiding from ourselves at the end of the day.
I think that is such an important distinction because I was brought up in like Christianity, evangelical Christianity. And I would say, I believed God was this spirit and then Satan was a spirit and they were both after me. You know what I mean? They both wanted me for themselves. And so I was like this pawn in their game. And they were like, if I make a good choice, it was because God led me to it. If I made a bad choice, Satan made me do it. And so I felt kind of like, who am I? Like, what do I'm just being used. Like, what, who's going to win? Who's going to get me in the end? And since deconstructing, like I've realized what makes me feel peace. And I'm not saying this is true. And that's such a distinction, which I think nobody can really say this is true, because it's opinions, it's interpretations and whatever. But what makes me feel that personal responsibility that you're talking about is that this is a battle that we all face. We have the angel on our shoulder and the devil on our shoulder. You can make a bad choice and then you have, bent toward that Satan's sort of spirit. You can make a good choice and you have, bent toward the God spirit or the Christ spirit. And I feel like now that I realize that I have control over that, I am not just a pawn. I am an actual human being with temptations and fears, but also, strengths. And what you're saying is when we actually really look at it, we don't really have to be afraid. We just have to look inside. Is that what I'm getting here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, fear is necessary in order to be courageous. And
Mm,
so it's meant to, this ability to choose is really the most empowering thing.
Yeah.
It's like we're given a choice. Like, do you want to take the easy way that's going to, satisfy you instantly, or do you want to take the road where satisfaction's not going to come? It's not going to
Mm.
come anytime soon, and it's going to hurt, and it's going to be painful. But somehow that the painful route, as it seems, is the way to go. Like, only you can make that choice. And
Whew.
at the end of it, that's the most empowering thing that you would want. And so it does remove that inability or that weakness where it's like I'm just a pawn in somebody else's game, to where, like, hey, I'm going to choose,
Yeah.
and I'm going to choose what's right for me in this instant. And there's consequences to my choices, right?
Yep.
Like, I'm going to have an easy, gratifying, quick fix, or I'm going to have a long route that's going to take me into a journey of self-discovery that's going to be painful, and people are going to question me, and people are going to fight against me. And that's really, like, if you didn't realize that, that's really what gives you the opportunity to choose what's right for you. Like,
Mm.
the ability to choose is your freedom. And yes, we are in a game. I believe that. I believe we're in a game that it's meant to play out, and inevitably it will end. Hopefully it ends, and we realize whether our choices were to the best. And sometimes what hurts the most is not knowing whether these choices are best, or oftentimes that we're not going to see the end of it is often a fear. And to me, the fear is the most empowering part about it, because if it wasn't for the fear, to me, the devil plays the role of showing you, of you being afraid. And
Mm.
it's like that stern father role, that stern father that knows there are consequences to things and cannot sugarcoat things for you. The devil plays that role for me, where it's like stern and strict, and these are the consequences, and they're real life consequences, and you cannot avoid real life consequences. There's no sugarcoating it for you. It will hurt. This is the consequence of it. And then, there's the light of things where, there's just consequences to your choices. And that's the game. Like, you
Mm.
cannot avoid consequence. You cannot
Right.
hide from it. You have to be courageous, if you want to be the courageous character in your story, at the very least. And that's your choice. We're all on our hero's journey, as they say.
Hmm.
And what we've learned from the stories that we've been told our entire life is, we don't want a boring story. We don't want a story with no purpose. We don't want a story that goes nowhere. If we want to be the main character in our story, then we're going to have to make a courageous choice. And that's only in the face of fear that we're allowed to do it.
Mm. That's an interesting perspective. I don't even think I've ever heard that before. But you know what? This is the cool thing about where I'm at in my life right now, Jay, is like I'm learning so much from these journeys I'm listening to. And whether or not I'm like, whoa, that's 100% what I believe. I don't know if that's what I believe. Right now, I'm willing to listen and try to understand your perspective because I think it's so fascinating. And we all have so much that we can learn from each other if we would just listen, you know? And I think sometimes we get so dogmatic in what we believe that we're afraid to listen because we don't want to be taken down a wrong path. But I think what you're saying is you still have a choice. You don't have to, like, you're not telling me, hey, come down my path with me. You even said, this is what motivates me. This is my way of seeing, just like when I was saying, this is how I see it. It's not what I'm saying. And I wish we would do that more. Do you know what I mean? And is this kind of the underlying theme of your books is like teaching kids, to think for themselves?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More than anything, I want people to think for themselves. I
Mhm.
don't I don't need or want people to agree with me. My parents don't
Same.
agree.
Yeah,
Uh,
same.
and and we've come closer than ever,
Yeah.
because we don't have to agree.
Yeah.
I don't have to agree with my parents. They don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with everybody in my life in order to get along. Getting along isn't really that difficult. I want to be able to share my story, and I want you to be able to share your story, and I want us to get along. And if you're in danger, I'm going to come to your rescue, and I hope that you come to my rescue if I'm in danger,
Yeah.
because you're not going to let me drown just because you don't agree with me.
Right.
That's not what this story is about. This story is about bringing the best out of each other. And if I say something that challenges your beliefs and you allow yourself to be challenged, well, then I brought the best out of you. And that's
Ooh,
all I want. I want you to bring the best out of me too.
that is so good. That's going to be, yeah, I'm going to use that as a clip to promote this episode because that was so good. It's powerful, I think, when people really just own their voice and realize they actually have one. You're not a pawn. You're not, um, I don't know. I just remember like the theology that I was brought up in, Jay, was you're born separated from God. He can't even look at you because you're a sinner. And in order for you to be connected to God, you need to have Jesus come into your heart, and then he will cover your sins. So then God can look at you because now he sees Jesus and not you. So I grew up believing that I was an absolute piece of junk. And the only thing good in me was Jesus. And saying that felt so, um, I don't know, it felt so right. It felt like this is truth. Now that I've been out of it and I've listened to other perspectives and I've really challenged what I've believed and allowed it to challenge me, like you said, if you allow it to challenge you. Now that I've done that, I realize, I am not junk. God didn't create me to be a piece of junk that he couldn't look at. That makes zero sense. And and that Jesus, his message was more for, hey guys, when you're connected to God and you know that and you believe that, then you can do even greater things than me. Like his life was such a beautiful example of walking in love. And I don't know how we've lost touch with that through the years in religion. And I think that's why I would say I'm spiritual, not religious, because I feel like I am connected to God. Nobody can tell me that I'm not. You're not going to give me a prescription that's, if you do this, then God will be no, God just is. And that's why I'm breathing. That's how I believe. How do you see God now that you're kind of in this space?
I see through God, I see that God is inevitable and unavoidable. And the best part about me, because it shines light into whom I've become, who I am, whether I'm not as good as I think I am, that's God shining through, or when I'm having really great days and I'm at my best, that's God shining through. And the one that sees the truth, that's what God represents to me. The
True.
one that the one that knows, the one that sees is God.
Mm, I like that. That's good. And I don't know. I feel like this is just such a really fun conversation for me. I could talk about this stuff all day just because it's just so
Me too.
fascinating. And it's hard because sometimes I'm like, Leslie, you're in a podcast. You can't just sit there and think about it. You have to talk. And I'm like, but I just want to
You
I want
can
to
put
marinate on this. Yeah. What did you just say, Jay? I'm sorry.
you can edit, you can put this thing together. Feel free to just think it out.
Yeah, yeah. And I that's true. I've actually thought of doing a special series, I guess, on honoring the journey where I walk people through a meditation you know, I just ask them questions. How do you feel about this today? And then just give them time. Silence. When do we listen to silence? Never. I feel like we're always trying to hear and go and move and like the voice I believe of God is loudest in the silence. And so, yeah, if you want to ever pause and just think, do it, my friend, if you're listening. So Jay, you said you have a new baby girl.
Yeah.
Um, tell me, I don't know, like I just think because of your perspective on everything, like the first time you held her, how did you feel?
Mostly surreal. Like it's been a long time coming, and I'm like, how can
She's
it
here.
be? She's finally here. And I've been observing her for, the past several days. She's 8 days old.
Mm.
So I've been observing her, and she's actually, you know, strange to say, but she's a lot like me. She's quiet. She doesn't cry. She doesn't cry at all. So if like my wife doesn't feed her, she's not even gonna ask for food. Like, so it's like it's almost like me, where it's like I don't really need any of you. I'm just waiting for my time. I just feel like
Yeah.
she's just so purposeful. She's so purposeful in her being. I'm so proud of her already. You know, and,
Oh.
and I'm just watching her, like, she doesn't do much, so she breathes. I watch her breathe, and like I watch her belly fill up with air, with oxygen, and I'm like, this is how we're supposed to breathe. Like, it's almost like we forgot to breathe. We're not supposed to like
Mm.
breathing with our chest. It's like we started breathing with our chest when we got anxious and nervous, and the world of the weight was on our shoulders. And I'm just seeing like this innocence, and I'm like, how can I conserve this innocence as long as possible? How can I
Mm.
just not ruin this perfect being? And it's just beautiful. It's magical. I talk about it with my wife, and it's just, we just look at her. I just look at her, and
Mm.
there's literally, at least for this past week, there's nothing else I want to do. I just want to look at her.
I remember those days. Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, these are the times of your life, write it all down, Jay, because even what you just said about breathing, like that's a book, like I mean, it could even just be something that you write, like observations. Listen to me trying to give you writing advice, and you're like way better of a writer than me. But like if as you have these observations of your daughter, maybe like write a book for her that you can give to her, like that you've noticed this week. I noticed that, I saw this in you, or you're teaching me this. And then you can give it to her one day. I think that'd be amazing.
That's a great idea. Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, and when you do, I wanna see it.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to share it.
18 year when she turns 18, you can give it to her, and then you can be like, "All right, Leslie, here it is."
I'd love to share it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, you have been such a delight, Jay. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and, I'm excited to tell the listeners about your book or your books. So if you wanna just maybe spend a couple minutes telling me which ones you've already written, which ones you're thinking of writing. We already know of one.
Yeah.
And like how people can get to them.
Sure. You can search Conscious Bible Stories on Amazon. They're available on Amazon, consciousbiblestories.com. I've essentially started writing at the Cain and Abel story, and I'm going backwards. So we're right at the Adam and Eve stories, which is a 3-part series. They're still very short stories, because these stories are short after all. In the Bible, it's like, like 2 paragraphs change our entire lives. It's really mind blowing how that can
Yeah,
happen.
I know it is crazy.
uh, and it's not released yet, but I'm soon to release the relationship between God and Lucifer, which is actually uh, the most empowering story to me. That relationship and how that plays out, at least in my imagination.
Mhm.
But in Amazon, you can search my name. You can search Conscious Bible Stories, and I write these stories because I feel I have a unique perspective on how I see the world,
You
and
do. You do, definitely.
it's I've affected not only myself, my family, my wife, my friends, my family, and it just seems to be that everyone whom I feel comfortable enough to share these stories with positively affects their life, at the very least, so that they can think about something different. And I'm very proud of myself. I'm proud of how far I've come in my development as a human being, and whom I'm becoming as a man, as a father, as a husband. So this is literally the best of myself, and I'm
Mm.
just doing my best. And I really do believe at the end of the day, we're all doing our best, even when we're at our worst.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. And I do think if we didn't have a worst side, we wouldn't be able to really recognize and embrace the best. And what a unique and interest. This is the first time, and I've heard you're my 50th podcast.
Oh wow.
And I, like you literally, I'm just like, whoa. Mind blowing. So good. So thank you very much, Jay. And I honor your journey and I thank you for sharing it with us. And yeah, I wish you nothing but the best. I'll make sure all of these links are in the show notes for people to just click on so they can get to them.
Thanks, Leslie. It's been a real pleasure.